This is Daniel Carter. Today, his clothing brand ships to customers in all 50 states. But 15 years ago, Daniel didn't own a single store. He didn't even own a table. He was sitting on the floor of his mother's garage in Millbrook, Ohio, $42,000 in debt, no job, and no plan. This is the story of a man who failed twice before he ever succeeded once. And if you've ever felt like you're starting from zero, stay with me, because Daniel's story might change the way you look at your own. Daniel was 11 years old when his father died. A construction accident, sudden, no warning. One evening his father simply didn't come home. His mother, Linda, was left to raise Daniel and his younger sister alone. She took a job at the local diner during the day and cleaned offices at night. Money was always tight. Some months, tight meant macaroni for dinner 3 nights in a row. Daniel remembers watching his mother count coins on the kitchen table to figure out if they could afford new shoes for school. He was too young to help financially, but old enough to feel the weight of it. I didn't understand grief back then, Daniel says now. I just understood that things were harder for us than for other kids. And I carried that feeling for a long time. In school, Daniel wasn't a star student. His grades were average at best. He struggled to focus, struggled to see the point of algebra when he was worried about the electric bill at home. Teachers weren't unkind, but the message was clear. Daniel wasn't college material. By senior year, most of his classmates were talking about which university they got into. Daniel didn't apply anywhere. I remember a guidance counselor telling me I should look into a trade, Daniel recalls. She wasn't trying to be cruel, but it stuck with me, like somebody had already decided what I was capable of. He graduated high school with no real plan, working part-time at a hardware store, unsure what came next. For most people, that uncertainty fades. For Daniel, it would take nearly a decade and 2 devastating failures before he found his direction. When Daniel was 23, he ran into an old classmate, Marcus, at a gas station. Marcus had opened a small streetwear shop downtown. Nothing fancy, just a couple 100 square feet. But he was doing well. New car. Talking about opening a second location. Something clicked in Daniel. For the first time in years, he felt something other than uncertainty. He felt hunger. I thought, if Marcus can do this, why can't I? Daniel says, I didn't know anything about retail. I didn't know anything about clothing, but I knew I wanted out of where I was. Within a few months, Daniel had a plan, or what he thought was a plan. He was going to open his own clothing store. Daniel took out a small business loan, $42,000, and signed a lease on a modest storefront in a strip mall outside Millbrook. He called it Carter's Clothing Company. He was proud. His mother came to the opening. For the first time in his life, Daniel felt like he was becoming somebody. But pride doesn't run a business. Experience does. And Daniel had none. He overordered inventory and sizes and styles nobody wanted. He didn't understand seasonal buying cycles. He priced items based on what felt right, not on what the market would pay. He spent almost nothing on marketing because he assumed customers would just show up. They didn't. Within 8 months, Daniel was drowning. Sales were a fraction of what he needed to cover rent, let alone pay back the loan. He tried discounting everything, It wasn't enough. He tried a second loan to stay afloat. That only deepened the hole. 11 months after opening, Carter's clothing company closed its doors for good. I remember locking up the store for the last time. Daniel says, $42,000 gone. Debt I had no way to pay. And worse than the money, I felt like I had proven that guidance counselor right. Daniel moved back in with his mother. He was 24 years old, deep in debt, and by every outward measure a failure. For a few months, he barely left the house. He avoided old classmates. He avoided Marcus. He took odd jobs just to make minimum loan payments. Stocking shelves overnight, doing landscaping on weekends. There's a specific kind of shame that comes from failing publicly. Daniel says, everyone in town knew Carter's clothing company had closed. I felt like I was wearing it. But here's the thing about rock bottom. It's solid ground. And eventually, Daniel had to decide whether he was going to stay there or push off from it. Daniel still had boxes of unsold inventory from a failed store. Clothes he couldn't sell in a storefront, but maybe he could sell somewhere smaller. Somewhere with almost no overhead. He borrowed a folding table from his mother's garage and set up at the Millbrook Weekend Flea Market. Total starting investment, less than $300. No lease, no employees, just Daniel, a table, and whatever inventory he had left. It felt like such a step down, he admits, from owning a store to selling out of a folding table. But I didn't have another option, and honestly, that was the best thing that ever happened to me. This time, Daniel did something different. He listened. He talked to every single customer. He learned what sizes actually sold, what price points people would pay, what styles moved fast, and what sat untouched. He reinvested every dollar of profit straight back into inventory. Nothing went to himself. Week by week, the folding table grew into 2 tables, then a small tent, then a regular spot that customers specifically came looking for. After 18 months at the flea market, Daniel had saved enough and learned enough to open a small storefront again. This time, everything was different. He knew his customers by name. He knew exactly what to stock because he'd spent 1.5 years testing it in real time with real people. He didn't overborrow. He grew only as fast as the business could support. The new store, which he called Carter Supply Company, turned a profit within its first 4 months. 1 year later, he opened a second location in a neighboring town, then a small warehouse to handle online orders, then a real team, people Daniel hired, trained, and trusted. 10 years after locking the doors on his very first failed store, Daniel Carter was running a clothing company with multiple locations, a growing online presence, and a story that most people in Millbrook still didn't know the full details of. People saw the second store and thought it was an overnight success, Daniel says. They didn't see the first store. They didn't see the flea market table. They didn't see the year I couldn't leave my mother's garage. If this story meant something to you, you don't need $42,000 and a storefront to start. You just need a folding table and the decision to sit down at it one more time than you fail.